secure socket layer is really the predecessor to TLS. The process hasn't really changed that much, just the way that we actually implement the cryptography and those kinds of things has really changed. But typically what happens in a SSL or TLS conversation is the endpoint over here is going to open up, a web browser, okay? And it's going to go to www.skyline-ats.com and say, hey, validate that you are who I think you are. What's then going to happen is the server is going to respond with a signed certificate, including the server's public key. And so the server is going to say, here are my credentials so that you can validate who I am. The endpoint is then going to validate that against its own certificate store in its browser. Then it's going to use the combination of the server's public key and the shared secret key that it created over here in the communications process and come back and say, okay, I've validated you are who you say you are, and I want to have a conversation with you. So this shared key and encrypted with the public key of the server is sent back. And then, of course, we use bulk encryption, right, using symmetric keys. So this is typically asymmetric because it uses a certificate architecture to actually do the initial conversation piece. And this is, of course, preceded by the three-way TCP handshake to establish the base connection parameters. Now, what's interesting about this is that although the broadest use case of TLS is web browsing, there are other use cases. So, for example, secure FTP, post office protocol, which is an email application. TLS uses this for validation. And the biggest thing over here is that this doesn't usually require any additional software on the endpoint, unlike AnyConnect SSL VPNs. So in an AnyConnect SSL VPN, what we're basically doing is between some client-based device out here on the internet, and of course we're going to use Cisco AnyConnect as a client. What we do is we go into our ASA or our next generation firewall, our firepower, or we go into our router that has a security package on it, and we actually configure this. And what this allows us to do is it allows us to basically build a secure tunnel. This over in here would be the internet, right? So this space between the two of them would effectively be the internet. And then what we would do is we would basically authenticate to our ASA. Now, there are a couple of ways we can do that. One is called full tunnel. In full tunnel mode, basically what we have is we have basically everything goes back to the ASA. And then, so all the traffic is encrypted. And then prior to routing, right, so prior to going out to the internet or anywhere else, everything kind of anchors at the ASA. In split tunnel, only traffic that is actually destined for company resources behind the ASA is actually sent across the tunnel. And usually the way this happens is when you fire up the AnyConnect client on your endpoint, there's a virtual adapter in your client that's actually used to actually facilitate the communication back to the ASA.